So I'm absolutely delighted to be back reprising my role as Madam Chair of this debate. We've run the debate for 3 years now. I've had the absolute privilege of being the chair of all of those, and I'm extremely excited to have had the opportunity to bring it to the East Coast this year. So this was really in response to the feedback that we had from the members of the Gold Industry Group in Melbourne and Sydney that saw the tremendous success that we had seen with this event in Perth and said that they wanted to see it here. So we have responded, and armed with an extremely able and enthusiastic group of speakers, we've been able to make that happen, and that's something that we're enormously proud of. So thank you so much for coming to make this inaugural event here a success, and we're very much looking forward to being back in future years. Now, I know that you're all dying to hear from the panel, and I'm not going to take up very much of your time, but what I am going to do first is introduce them, and then I'm just going to give you a couple of very quick thoughts about this evening's topic. Now, our first speaker this evening for the proposition is Stuart Jenner, who is the General Manager of Capability and Culture for Gold Road Resources. He is a people capability professional with more than 18 years' experience in senior leadership roles across mining, government, defence, retail and private enterprise. In his current role, Stuart is responsible for the strategy, risk, people, culture and health, safety and environment functions. And after that, he even manages to find the time to be one of my Gold Industry Group co-directors. So thank you very much, Stuart. Our second speaker this evening for the opposition is Julia Savio, who is the Principal of Diversity and Inclusion at Newcrest Mining. She's a specialist in stakeholder management and culture, and Julia has a passion for developing an engaged and diverse workforce based around creating inclusive environments that both educate and support people and the wider communities in which they work. Julia has launched Newcrest's first diversity and inclusion strategy, their first Indigenous relations policy, and has expanded the company approach to engage LGBTIQ community and greater cultural and religious diversity. Thank you very much, Julia. Our third speaker is Felicia Binks, who is the Environment and Community Manager at Kirkland Lake Gold at the Fosterville Gold Mine. An experienced communicator, she's held a variety of roles in a number of operations, both in Australia and overseas. She's responsible for establishing and maintaining key relationships with community and government stakeholders and raising awareness of the importance of mining to the region, something which I think we can all, given recent events, relate to very keenly. Our final speaker of the evening, but by absolute no means least, is Shay Russell, who is Chief Editor of Agora Financial Australia. Shay is the Chief Editor of the Daily Reckoning Australia, Rock Stock Insider and Hard Money Trader. Over the past decade, Shay has worked as an analyst on some of Australia's most widely read financial investment newsletters, translating global macro trends for Aussie investors and showing them how to take advantage of these trends. Examining the broader trends playing out in the world, she provides a unique insight into global events through the prism of her distaste for central banks and a rational love of all things bullion, something which is absolutely music to our ears. So as a very brief introduction to the debate topic for this year, for those that have had some exposure to the events that we've run previously, you'll know that what we try to do with this event is explore some of the more knotty angles around diversity, and we're not afraid of courting a little bit of controversy. So in year one, we looked at whether or not we needed to stop fixing women. And last year, we explored the utility of gender equity targets. This year, we're having a little bit of a change of tack. So I've been really interested over the last 12 or 18 months in the amount of commentary that I'm seeing around this idea of diversity fatigue, particularly with respect to gender diversity. It seems that we've accelerated forward into a place of fatigue pretty damn quickly, actually. So I'm really interested as to how we've got there. So for this year, what our panel is actually going to be looking at is whether or not the focus on gender diversity's created unintended consequences, or whether that as a strategy was in fact flawed from the outset. And so without further ado, I move the following motion. This House says that a diversity debate that begins and ends with gender is doomed to fail. And with that, I welcome my esteemed panel to the stage. Stuart, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Kelly. It's great to be back here in Melbourne, and I can see some of my previous colleagues from Newcrest in front of me and the opposition. I've been told I'm going down, but it's going to be great.
We're going to smash you, Stuart.
First, let me say that we had to start somewhere, and gender was where we needed to start. What's been achieved in this space has been great, and we've come a long way, but there's a lot more that we need to do. We should be proud how far we've come and what it's taken to get there. But let me ask you, have we over-focused on gender? Are our people internally and is society externally experiencing the gender fatigue that Kelly spoke about? It certainly wasn't the intent, but are we going too over the top? To the detriment of not only gender, but other dimensions of diversity. If we really want true diversity, then why aren't we putting more attention and focus into things beyond gender? Such as ethnic cultures, faith, religion, language backgrounds, Indigenous, ancestral background, age, sexual orientation, veterans, special needs, disabilities, including cognitive and neurological disabilities. It doesn't matter how we slice it or how we cut it, diversity is more than one or two-dimensional. It is multi-dimensional. Some areas have their complexity, but in my opinion, we make things overcomplicated. I'm a firm believer that there's a simple mindset that can guide us. The best person for the role. That's it. Simple. When we say it, it's amazing how much we complicate it with policies, procedures, quotas and whatever. We started with gender, but we can't finish with gender. We need to continue together and finish together. I'm a father of 5. 4 girls, 1 boy, 10 weeks old. I don't worry about my son when it comes to his future in our mining industry or anywhere else from a gender perspective. I don't worry about my daughters. But one of my daughters had special needs. She was born with a rare medical condition, and I was concerned for her entry into the workforce. I'm concerned for many of the kids that I know and what their future working lives will look like. As a society, we can do more. As a mining industry, we can do a lot more. Let's use their skills. Let's not pigeonhole them. Let's not do a token effort, but actually think about where we can create value together for them, for the organisations that they work for and we work for, and society as a whole. Let's strive and be authentic in that value creation. There are barriers we need to overcome, but let's not make them higher than they actually are, and let's definitely not create ones that do not need to be there. Taking the special needs and disability space, there are inherent health and safety risks in our operating environment. We know that. It makes it very difficult for some people to work or impossible to work in some areas. Underground, open pit, process plant. But really, can we honestly put our hand on our heart and say that we've absolutely exhausted and done what we could do to unlock their potential and our true diversity potential with other roles on the surface or in the corporate environment? Let's be authentic, respectful, caring and committed. Let's provide some focus and attention to the special needs and disability space when it comes to diversity and inclusion, and overcome the uncertainty that our leaders have. They don't know what they don't know. It's a new space. And guess what? They were there with gender. We've done it. We could do more, but we need to learn and apply it into these other spaces. If we do that, we'll not only get their awareness and understanding, but we'll get their belief and commitment in this space and other areas of diversity. The opposition may possibly hit you with some statistics. Like, we would like to start with gender because there is statistically more women in our population, so it is the bigger issue. And we need to continue focusing on that and the bigger issue.
Have you read our speech, Stuart?
No, I've just had the privilege of attending to others. And who likes ice cream? Put your hands up if you like ice cream and keep them up, please. Everyone's wondering where Stuart's going with this one. Come on, Mel. Come on.
Cameraman likes ice cream.
So, you've got a group of friends over for dinner. You go to the freezer and you have 7 different tubs of flavoured ice cream for you and your guests. The chocolate tub is bigger than all the other 6 tubs of the other flavours. So, do you just go, oh, I'm going to concentrate on chocolate and only have chocolate? Or deprive your guests of the other 6 flavours? Some of you are sitting there going, I'd have all 7. Don't worry, you don't have to put your hand up for that one, but I know there'll be people out there. Diversity is like ice cream. To really experience the value of it, you need all the flavours. Sound a bit like Tom Hanks in Forrest Gump there, box of chocolates. Structurally though, there are things in our environment that are influencing us away from making a difference and doing better in this space. There are things like data, reports, research, quotas, even some people taking roles and several board roles, potentially preventing the opportunity for others, especially when there might be a diversity focus with a quota. And if that quota is taken by the same person on several boards, is that really truly helping the gender? You visit the ASX website, which I'm sure you've all done today. The useful diversity articles and resources, 13 articles appear, 10 of them only talk about gender. Again, we are structuring our environment to act and think a certain way. McKinsey's delivering through Diversity Report 2018, another interesting read. And it is a very interesting read. And I know one other person who's read it, my counterpart Bob from Evolution, who was my Sydney brother last night, lost, but I'm hopefully doing him proud tonight.
Who did he lose to?
The other team.
Which was the opposition?
Yours, yes,
okay. I just wanted to check.
Yeah.
Just wanted to check
So
on that
we can start by changing things tonight, okay, everybody? Statistically significant correlation between a more diverse leadership team and financial outperformance continues to hold true. Companies in the top quartile for gender diversity on executive teams were 21% more likely to outperform on profitability and 27% more likely to have superior value creation. It's not just gender. Companies in the top quartile for ethnic and cultural diversity were 33% more likely to have industry-leading profitability. But that's in the report, that's where the stats finish. There's plenty on equity, there's plenty on ethnic culture in that McKinsey report, there's nothing on disability and only 2 mentions of sexual orientation. I'm privileged to work for a company that values diversity. We like different, but we've got a long way to go. We've got 35% female, 35% of our people come from countries other than Australia. We employ people from 12 different countries. We've got a field service supervisor who says, it's like working for the United Nations. Age, 18 to 71. 7% of our veterans are of the workforce are veterans from Army, Navy and Air Force for Australia and overseas. Other companies outside of gold have recognised the value. McMahon and FMG have created specific and structured veterans programs. They've recognised the value of the skills, experience, qualifications and attitudes that veterans can bring that cannot be gained or obtained in other sectors. Their programs have overcome barriers and stigma of soldiers, sailors, airmen and airwomen from apparently all being broken and all having PTSD. The With You, With Me report in 2018 stated that veteran unemployment was 30.2%, 5 times higher than the national average. Not only is unemployment of veterans an issue, underemployment of veterans is an issue. They're in a role where we're not utilising their full knowledge, experience or capability. What an amazing talent pool that we are not tapping into. The Australian Defence Force, though, has had its own issues in diversity. You've probably seen them on the media. Issues on gender, you've probably seen those on the media as well. Some of their initiatives have gone too over the top. Last week I had our Army member join the organisation, female ex-Army. She left the Army and came to Gold Road, and she said to me, Stuart, the gender issue is absolute bullshit in Army. We have gone too far. And she told me about this 6-week special program where overweight female soldiers get specialised classes and training, dedicated paid time to train and keep fit, nutritional information and other support. There is no special program equivalent for overweight male soldiers. So you think the females like this in army? They hate it because it is creating a divide. And this is one of those examples where we've just gone too far. In closing, Martin Moore, the former CEO of CS Energy and the creator and founder of the No Bullshit Leader podcast and program, and if you haven't listened to if you want a good leadership podcast, listen to him. He says, if we think the same and do the same, then one of us is redundant. And I think that is just a great, simple philosophy that can help us embrace diversity at all organisational levels. We started with gender, and I've already told you I agree that we needed to start somewhere and continue our efforts in that space. But we are missing most of the pie. We need to do more effort, more focus in other areas. We need to put more than just gender on the agenda. Thank you very much.
I can see frantic note-taking from the opposition. I also saw some, some whispered discussions, and there's clearly some very insightful thoughts. But first off, Stu, thank you very much for a very compelling argument in favour of taking a very broad view of diversity and what that can do for our organisations and indeed our culture. Julia, what do you have to say to that? Over to you.
Thank you, Kelly. Well, okay, yes. Centre stage, yes, please. Thank you. And thank you, Peter, for that introduction as well. Stuart. I'm going to get to you later. But to close with our argument as missing out on most of the pie, like 50% of the female pie, I think you could come over to our team and you'd do just as well. But before that, I too would like to start with acknowledging the Wurundjeri people, both past, present and future of the Kulin Nations. Pay my respects to those people. And it is a very easy job to pay my respects to those people when we are in a location like this, with a scenery and a backdrop of water like that. I think that's really important, particularly recently, to focus on water and take a moment to think of our friends and colleagues in New South Wales and Queensland that are really devastated by fire. It makes it easy to forget sometimes how important water is, particularly to this country, particularly to our industry. Fortunately, last Friday at the very first Perth GIG Great Debate, we had a wonderful young Indigenous woman, Ms Cumming, a Whadjuk woman from the Noongar Nation, talk to us about her connection to land and also emphasised the importance of water and the value of water. And she did a great exercise, which I'm hoping you'll indulge me for a moment, which is for you to think about your connection with water. What's a memory that you have of water if we think about our traditional owners and the importance of this land? For me, there's two very short stories, which are my first memory of water. I grew up in regional New South Wales, a little country town called Bathurst. I know I've got a fellow New South Welshman. Obviously, Cadia is a very successful gold mine that we operate in that region, is also battling through fires. As I grew up, there was a period, as there are many, of times of drought. And I have a memory of water being advised to not flush the toilet if you did a wee, only flush the toilet if you did a poo. And that's how I grew up, thinking that all kids have that same value and appreciation of water. My second memory is on holidays with family, travelling from Manly to Circular Quay on the ferry and looking down at the waves crashing. And I think it's important when we are really struggling with times of water and sustainability to maybe think of some memories that you have water to help you readjust and reaffirm how important it is. I also have another shout out and acknowledgement, and that is to our brightest students from Monash University, the mining sector. Please put your hands up. Everyone, do yourself a favour. And after today's debate, go and introduce yourselves to these amazing young people, because they will be your boss in not too long. I also can't have this platform if I don't thank the Gold Industry Group for this opportunity. We all wouldn't be here. I'm so pleased that my fellow Melbournians have turned out for it, and why wouldn't you? There was gold champagne on tap. On a serious note, it's a brave thing, the gold industry group, doing something different, taking a chance, a calculated risk, not going about something the same way that they always have done, and coming to the East Coast. And for that, I commend. For that, they are very aligned with our argument. For that, I commend. For me, in part, this is what this debate is about. It's about being brave enough to say that we need a change. And the question isn't about gender to the exclusion of everything else, as Stuart has tried to convince you. It's actually a matter of sequencing. Let's get this right first. Let's do the right thing and achieve gender equity first. And by doing so, we will actually achieve so much more in the broader realm of diversity as well. Gender diversity matters, and it's meaningful and impactful for the best of everyone, not just for the best of women, in our workplaces and our broader communities. That is the reason alone why gender diversity needs to be dealt with first, because it has good outcomes for everyone. Flexible work, for example, initially was created for mums when they were returning to work. Now we all know the benefits of a balanced workplace and work-life balance, and we all have varied needs, even if it's not for parental or care. Workplace flexibility is no longer just for the mums or the girls, but is for everyone. But it did start for the mums and the girls. Maternity leave. Oh, sorry, you might not be familiar with that term. It's now known as paternity leave. Once again, the same thing. It started for women after a very, very long time of not being there, but now is accessible to all for the greater good. Having women in the work environment is good for business. Men, women, and all of us. You're still not 100% convinced? I will, of course, develop this argument further, but a final thank you is required. To my employer and primary sponsor for tonight, Newcrest Mining, thank you for empowering me to be here. I'm proud of you. I also am very proud of my fellow colleagues that are before me, and thank you and commend you for being here. I want to remind you that I am head of Newcrest Social Committee, and if you don't scream your little hearts out at the end of the debate to ensure that we win, there will be no Christmas party. The fact that I can see so many of my colleagues here.
I'm the one with the ice cream.
You can come to the Christmas one. Oh, do not get me started on the ice cream debate, Stuart. I wasn't going to bring that up. I was going to let that one slide, to be fair. The fact that I can see so many of my wonderful colleagues in front of me at a Women in Gold event, admit the majority of them are women at our Women in Gold event, is testament to the desire that the industry has a great need to focus the debate on gender. For this is why we are here, and for this is the reason why we continue to need to focus it on gender. Newcrest...
On that note, I'm pretty sure there's a fair amount of research around the absence of something doesn't mean the presence of something else.
Shh, male friend, you've had your time.
Oh, Stuart, I haven't even got to my rebuttals yet, but you just keep beating me and I like it. As I was saying before, I was so rudely interrupted, which is probably a common feeling that many women around the room have. The wonderful Newcrest employed me nearly 2 years ago as their Principal of Diversity and Inclusion, due to an understanding from the very top. Our board and executive committee knew that more needed to be done and we needed to be better. Of course, they knew, like us here, that creating a diverse and inclusive culture took on a spectrum of ideas and critical initiatives to enable change and deliver benefits, as Stuart has mentioned, and this team over here will try and convince you is more important. However, more than that, they knew the greatest need was first and foremost to attract, recruit, and retain women. Starting here, was not to the exclusion of everything else, but was a catalyst to drive success and continue the conversation for broader diversity and inclusion, as my absolute powerhouse second speaker will close out with. If you do not focus on the area of the greatest need first, yes, Stuart, 50%. According to the latest status details, it's actually just over 50%. Then how can we possibly take ourselves seriously and ever look at anything else? If we don't commit to this change, then how will we ever do anything successfully? Deal with gender first. Now, as we are talking about gender, I think it's also important to note that for the purposes of this debate, we are talking about sexuality and identity as binary, purely male and female. I also know that not everyone fits easily into these very limiting categories and doesn't define themselves by these terms. For that, I apologise. Cordelia Fine informs us in her book that sex categories are how we divide our social world. This debate tonight isn't about whether that is right or wrong, but rather that's just how it is. Now, before I continue, I did start by saying that I would touch on a couple of Stuart's ridiculous comments, and you certainly didn't get off the hook that easily, Stuart. Your argument is simply flawed. You were trying to pull at our heartstrings, but how can we start to think more broadly if we haven't even got this right? We aren't arguing that diversity isn't multifaceted, like you have suggested, purely that we need to start with gender. Of those minorities, LGBTQI+, those with disabilities, neurodiversity, as well as cultural and ethnicity groups, what do you think one of every two of those are? Female. Newsflash, and thanks for identifying it as well, Stuart. If you've got over 50% of a group that are women, why not start there and achieve that? And how wonderful would it be if we're ticking some other boxes along the way? So if we really get serious and make the needed change to better improve gender diversity, we will further improve the situation of those other minorities in turn. But the focus needs to be on gender first. I certainly understand. I'm acutely aware that these are complex issues, but if we don't deal with gender first, we certainly are doomed to fail, because this is the area of diversity that is still so tough for so many, yet is so much easier than so many other areas of the challenging and complex spectrum of diversity, as Stuart mentioned. The reason for this is because gender diversity is visual. You can see it and you can declare it. We are the most comfortable as a society with this form of difference and diversity. It's the first thing we want to know when there's a new baby born, and it's the easiest thing to remember or to describe about someone when you first meet them. Further, work in this area has already started, and great things have happened. We have progressed. So let's harness this and continue. Let's keep going together. And before Felicia even gets up here and starts with her case on possible diversity fatigue, can I just say, I'm not tired. I am not tired. Would you ever be tired talking about safety? Would you ever be tired about talking about sustainability? Well, I'm here to tell you that I am not tired about talking about gender diversity or inclusion more broadly. I will never get tired about talking about what's right. I will never get tired about talking what is good and what is needed. I will never stop sharing about how we can better do more and how women bring so much to our work environments and broader communities. Why? Because it's not just good for women. It's good for all and to the betterment of all of our business and this industry for our utmost success. And another point that will undoubtedly come up tonight that I need to call BS on is how ridiculous of an argument that we should move past seeing difference and just treat everyone the same. Well, that just won't work out, will it? Because we're not all the same. That's why we're having this debate about diversity, because we're all different. Do you have something to say, Felicia?
I'm certainly not saying everyone is the same. Do we all look the same? No.
Exactly. That's the point on diversity. A woman will need her own toilet underground. If a mother is returning to work and is still breastfeeding her child, she will need a facility to express. Why? Because she's different, and it is offensive to suggest otherwise. Now, back to the argument that a diversity debate that begins and ends with gender is doomed to fail. Are you kidding me? It has been the greatest success and triumph of humankind, or should I say, mankind. The problem was they just started with the wrong gender first. I am obviously being, thank you. I am obviously being a little facetious, but seriously, surely the greatest feat of mankind has been the focus on masculinity since the very start of time, and what a raging win it has been for men. The focus was centred on gender, just exclusively the male gender, and the outcome has been a massive win. You boys really hoodwinked us. We can't argue that focusing only on gender doesn't work, as nothing has ever been more permeating or all-encompassing. The reason it is so tough and so slow, and we are so behind for women, is that it has been geared the wrong way, just one way, for all so long. And that's because we're living in a world that was designed for men, because they got it right. They thought a gender-sided argument, just looking at them, would work. As Caroline Carrido Perez in her book Invisible Women speaks to, the systematic discrimination and historic disadvantage through difference from temperature control in our offices, which is at the metabolic resting rate of a 40-year-old 70-kilo man, which on average is 5 degrees too cold for women, as our metabolic rate rests at a lower, or the fact that smartphones were designed on the average male, whatever that is, sized hand, or that cars were designed for the reference male body, again, whatever that is, so that although men are more likely to crash, women are 50% more likely to be seriously hurt. I'm just showcasing here a very small selection of data points that highlight how successful it has been by purely focusing on gender, that is, the male gender. But now it's our time. Another reason why, to enable success, the focus must be on gender, because it works. What else works? Women in business work. Research from McKinsey shows that companies with higher numbers of females in senior executives have stronger financial and organisational performance, demonstrating that it makes good business sense to have females operate in these positions. It is maddening then that the industry that for us, in round numbers, has 80-20 male to female ratio, that we are missing out on this amazing potential of the population. So what do we do about it? We start here first. I'm looking at your faces and I can see myself reflected back. Yes, I'm passionate, maybe some would even say emotional. Sure, I'll take that. And that's because this is personal. Not because I am female, but because it is for all of us and the greater good. Because it's the right thing to do, because all of our workplaces will benefit from it, and because it makes good business sense. Gender diversity is not about us and them. It is not a great divide, but a collective approach that needs to be tackled and achieved together by men and women, with 50% working with the other 50% to get the best out of each other. Take this as a call to action. You too have a part to play. Our industry has made inroads, and this is making a difference and is being noticed. Don't lose sight of what we have done, what we need to do, and what we will achieve collectively as an industry. Reaffirm the focus on improving diversity and inclusion by attracting, recruiting, and retaining women as the focus area. In closing, the argument isn't that more needs to be done or that other areas aren't important. It's just that we need to start here with gender diversity for the betterment of all. Can I get a hell yeah?
Oh, yeah!
Julia, thank you so much for that extremely well-reasoned and passionate account. And as somebody who, on a daily basis, freezes in a frigid office that is very much to the liking of my male colleagues, I can say that it resonated very much with me. Now, we've had a very strong start from our first two speakers who have completed the grand tour of all three debates by actually speaking to you this evening, having attended the other debates. I am now delighted to hand over to Felicia. Felicia, what have you got?
Yeah. It's not too late to change sides, Felicia.
Thank you, Julia. So, good evening, everyone. I'm obviously here to debunk the very passionate statements that were just made there, and it's very interesting, actually. Julia has diversity, inclusion, or inclusive in her title. And I started writing my speech by saying, when it was proposed that someone from Kirkland Lake come and speak tonight, I did think, why in the hell would I do that? I work in the environment and community field. I don't work in HR, and I certainly don't have diversity or inclusion in my title. However, I realised I have worked in the mining industry for a long time. There's nothing to say about age here, please. But however, because of that, of course I know what diversity issues are. I lived and breathed it for over 20 years in this industry. So, let us begin.
Yeah, well done. We'll quietly pay that.
I'm absolutely proposing that the overuse of the term gender diversity has led to resistance to engagement in our industry, and that we have a responsibility to disrupt the backlash that's occurring before diversity loses its essence. And this is from overuse and paying lip service to the term, such as gender, in the diversity, and that fatigue and backlash are inevitable. So, Julia kindly prompted my next section again, where I have said a clear example of when fatigue occurs is within the environment field with sustainability. Sustainability is absolutely suffering from fatigue. It is overused, inflated, misused, and the word is actually being diluted down by so many people that it's lost its true meaning or essence.
I think sustainability was pretty alive and well at Old IMA
Yes,
a couple of weeks ago.
and that's why there's such controversy.
What a wide range group of people they were.
Yes, because it's incorrectly used and it's twisted. So you've heard of sustainable investment firms. Sounds great, doesn't it? Or our politicians talking about sustainable economic growth. That is an oxymoron statement if I've ever heard of one. So the overuse and the dilution of the true meaning of the term, it's led to sustainability suffering from image problems and backlash, which is actually starting to be called greenlash for whatever reason. And companies are making a deliberate decision to remove the term sustainability when they're promoting environmental programs. So where's this come through from tonight? Well, I see a similar process is occurring with gender diversity. The gender in gender diversity is becoming overused and meaningless. And it's obscuring those real issues that we have with gender diversity, and it's becoming a fad and a tick in the box exercise. So when your rhetoric outpaces action, people become tired, and the constant messaging without seeing the long-term results also causes fatigue. And now we all know there's been various programs from lots of very energetic and great people since the 90s in the mining industry. But where is the overall movement and the increase in the stats? Now, someone has to give stats tonight, and I'm a science nerd, so sorry, you're getting stats from me. Workplace Gender Equality Agency, great report. So 2018, absolutely correct. Just over 50% of our population is female. And also, as a general industry average, 50% are employed. But what's the mining figure? I'm very embarrassed to say, in 2018, 16.7% of the mining industry was female. And of that 16.7%, only 18% held senior management positions and only 15% held executive positions, compared to 31% in the other industries. Now, other industries covers, yes, some female-dominated industries, but also manufacturing and engineering firms and other firms where males also dominate. So although we've made some progress, this progress is really, really slow. And so when you focus on only gender diversity and you have really slow progress, people become fatigued. So this is particularly true for men and women that work in the field, although not obviously Julia, because she's still very enthusiastic. But they work really hard and have for a long time to bring gender diversity to agendas to their companies. Firstly, they actually have to fight to get it on the agenda. Then they fight to get the funding and the resources to run these programs. And then when these programs fail, they go back around the circle again. And the programs often fail because it's led from the top down, or people are so fatigued from being told what to do. And I know I would be. If you'd continually work at something and you don't see results, you become fatigued. And let's not forget the employees. If the programs are imposed upon them, they will view it as corporate-led propaganda. So, what happens when people become fatigued? Well, we get backlash, and it's very real, and it occurs in lots of different forms that you may not recognise. So some are really obvious, and that's what you think of as backlash. You think of the pleasant people that were behaving very unpleasantly out the front of IMARC. That is very visible backlash. But of course we have some not so visible forms. Do you believe that there's backlash to gender diversity in your organisation? Have a think about that. When I interviewed a significant number of people from my organisation, again, I said, science person here, I had to get data. There was 50%, but only 50% that believed there was backlash. So they were on this side of the camp. Gender diversity is working and there is no backlash from employees, and we need to keep going. But the other 50% said when people become tired and fatigued to any programs, not just gender diversity, then backlash is very, very clear. And there were some great examples that came to mind. So refusal to engage, undermining, complacency, apathy, and there's conscious, but there's also unconscious resistance to things that are constantly drummed at them. Other research showed that Australia, we're very special. We have our own form of backlash here, and it's called perception gap. We think things are great, and our perception is that everything is rosy, and the figures show that they are not. There's also, of course, that general fear of the unknown and unformed people when they're isolated from the way these programs are designed, so then they become resentful, and then they fear the loss of power. So what I'm trying to explain here is that fatigue and backlash are symptoms of the issue, and it's something that our organisations need to address now. So when I was doing my research against this, and we had 50% that thought gender diversity is probably going okay, and the other 50% thought, no, there's backlash there.
So almost like 50% men, 50% women.
Yeah, but I obviously interviewed a lot of different people, but the majority, so 75% said, if you have backlash in your organisation, they do not know how to deal with it. And they are certainly not going to deal with it right now, and we need to do something different. So one reason that I thought that there's a trap that organisations fall into, and it's quite key for people here, is that no one is recognising in the design of these things that, or the fatigue, and they're also underestimating, your perception of diversity, and that it means so much more than just men and women. I mean, what does diversity mean to you? Take a stop for a second or 10 seconds and think, what does diversity mean to you? Do you automatically think it is gender, and that's what I'm going to think about? Or do you think about other things? So my fellow colleagues did not think it was male and female. They said, when we talk diversity, even if you say gender diversity, it means so much more to me. It means equal opportunities for everybody. It means no discrimination against anyone, be they gender, sexual orientation, age, race, or family responsibilities. They said that diversity means equal pay, working experiences and opportunities. And it also means you have a range of genders throughout all levels of your organisations. It also includes people, so there is inclusion of people with very different ways of thinking, and that's the new term, cognitive diversity. It's also being in a position which we would love to be, where we start to attract that 50% of the population which we're currently not tapping into properly, and being able to employ them equally. And lastly, perhaps one of the most simplest views that I did receive from a male, I might say, was it's just equality, where everyone's voice, view and opinion is equally valued. Seems pretty simple, right? It's just equality. But if it was that simple, obviously we'd have achieved it by now. So, in order to move forward, we need to incorporate more than just the numbers and more than just male versus female. We need to use various lenses to look at diversity, and both Julia and Stuart talked about that. There's a lot of different avenues to diversity, and we need to encompass more than just what we can see. The seeing the obvious is male versus female, but there is so much more than that, and we need to think about inclusion. So now I have a story. I want you to think about inclusion and different points of diversity. So I'd like you to picture that you are standing at a very busy section in New York. For anyone that's been to New York, you know that when the light goes green, there are a very large amount of people that walk across this intersection. So there are men and women in their tailored business suits talking on their phones or into their earpieces, pushing through the crowd. There's a couple of Jewish boys in their school uniforms, happily chatting as they head to school. There's an Asian girl with her pigtail bopping along because she's got music piece in and she's bopping along to only music she can hear. You smell a myriad of spices and flavours from the cafes and the food vans that are around the streets and in the courtyard behind you, and you can hear jazz music coming from a black man who's playing the guitar on the corner. So you would think that this is what diversity really looks and feels like. Okay, you've seen lots of different ages, races and smells, and you know there's so many cultures here. But New York is one of the most segregated cities in the US. Okay, the cultures do not mix. So the kids you saw would have separated and gone to separate schools. The businessmen absolutely would have went to their high-powered jobs. Most of those women, would have broke a glass and gone to their middle management jobs. And only a few of those women would have went to senior management jobs. One of those ladies you saw walking across that traffic light crossing would have went to that corner office with that really high-powered, high-level corner office and looked out as a CEO. So, having the correct numbers or the correct mix is just not enough. So where to from here? I'm coming back to the start where if we overuse and abuse a term and we pay it lip service without taking into consideration what people really understand it to mean, or make that substantial progress in those numbers, then the term not only loses its essence, but its ability to be used in the future. People then become fatigued, and then there's resistance and backlash, and most people we've already said don't believe our organisations know how to be well equipped to deal with that right now. Also, if we don't aim to have gender diversity ingrained in our everyday business, and when I say this, I mean like into the DNA of your organisation, and make our workplaces somewhere where people feel like they truly belong, then our industry will just become like the City of New York. We will have the numbers, we'll be able to tick that we've got the right gender balance, the right mix, but everyone will not belong. So let's become more sophisticated with our approach and include more than just male and female. Make it transparent a process across your organisation. And we need to invite people from all levels of the organisation into that workplace to design our programs and make it somewhere where all gender, races, age want to come to work, but also they're really valued for their differences. And then, only then, I've said, we will achieve real diversity and inclusion, and we'll also have those real lasting tangible results that we currently don't see. Thank you.
Wow, some really powerful analogies there. I loved the discussion around the really striking parallels with the sustainability piece. And I have to say that exploration of the really insidious and subtle forms of fatigue was really, really interesting. And I was reminded of a previous occasion where I'd gone out to one of our operations and somebody who met me from the airport said, so you out here to do some women's business or something? I said, no, I'm here to do my job. You know, when have you ever known me to come here for any other reason? But I thought that was another sort of form of that real fatigue. We have a speaker who is absolutely chomping at the bit to close us out, and I know that it is going to be a very, very strong finish. So over to you, Shay. Woo!
Is this on? All right.
Give her some space.
All right. So I'm a walker. Diversity. Deal with it. We got 4 women up on this stage and 1 man. Show me one ASX 200 board that looks like this. Google it if you need to. I'll guarantee you there is not one where there is this sort of gender distortion in favour of female on a board. My topic, a topic that starts with gender is doomed to fail. We're just getting started. As the opposition too, no, the focus on gender has opened up the necessary broader discussion around diversity. Now, I was going to start with Stuart and tearing him apart, but unfortunately, Felicia went and said something that had me write down a couple of words that my amazing teammate said, "You can't say that."
Oh, I can.
So I won't say, "Are you effing pooing me?" Just equality. Is this what a gentleman said to you? Just equality. It is not just equality. This isn't... I don't like gender debates for the fact that they do get caught up in genders and equal representation. But just equality, women routinely are talked over in board meetings by men that think they know better. Women are repeatedly having their ideas shut down in these boards. Women are repeatedly being reminded that their ideas aren't as good as their mate who just repeated what they said. I've lived this, and unfortunately, I lived this as recently as about 6 months ago.
So can I just say, given you really harassed me there, I said it's just equality where everyone's voice, view and opinion is equally valued.
That is true, you did say that. I'm a writer, it's my prerogative to slightly misquote people.
License.
The problem with this just equality, and that we, ideally, in an ideal world, that is what's happening, but it's actually not in practice. And as women in this room and as men, we've also witnessed it as well. This isn't the all men argument. The problem is, and this does keep happening, and I'm going to keep coming back to this theme later on, is that it's all about entrenched power structures, and that's what we're actually trying to break down. Now, Stuart. So we've moved on now. That's all right, that was all I was going for with you.
My bodyguard's at the back, he's just walked in.
That's all right, I reckon I can take him. All right.
She's got a whole file here, Stu. Does anyone need another drink?
I'm just going to point this out. I didn't actually write my speech down. I thought I'd see what would come out of the night. So I have no idea how long this is going to go. The upside for everybody is I'm in very high shoes, so that'll slow me down at some point. Stuart, I'm not going to go into your ice cream theory. I'm just not. But there's a couple of things that I do want to bring to your attention. Gender diversity was where we needed to start. You said that. And then you said we've come a long way. Oh, really? Do you know Blade Runner, the Ridley Scott movie made in 1982, was set in November 2019? Do you know that? They had laser guns, flying cars and humanoid robots. And here we are on the stage discussing gender diversity and if it's come far enough. No. If this is the conversation we are having in almost 2020, we are 45 days out of a new decade. And here we are having a conversation about, has gender diversity gone far enough or are we tired of it? The fact that we are having this conversation means that no. Now, the other card that Stuart went and played was the special needs child card. That's my card. I'm a single mum. I have 2 children and one with autism. Now, that technically puts me in the too hard basket to hire, but yet I outwork most of my co-workers. They're also mostly men. I bring in more money to the company than pretty much most of them. I've also worked out how to do my job more efficiently because of my diverse background, because I don't want to be going home and working harder there. Now, I do want to give Stuart a little bit of credit here for his diversity comment, because that is something I'm going to touch on later. Yes, we do need to start with gender, but the problem is starting with gender is we need to remember that it's also about bringing in broader diversity into our life. So Stuart's point, as much as it pains me to say this, it is very important that we change how we look at diversity. It's not just a gender argument, but we needed gender to start the conversation. Now, I've got another note here that you talked about, job misallocation. Is the man really telling me about job misallocation is my note. Gee whiz. In the stock markets, we have a phrase about we talk about misallocation in economies all the time of capital. And I'm going to touch on Felicia's comment as well. You said there's 16.7% women in mining in 2018. That's disgraceful. That is utterly disgraceful. How has an industry come far when it hasn't even got to 20%? That is not progress. But it does, more needs to happen, which again is why we need to continue the gender conversation. We need to remind employers that people from diverse backgrounds can bring huge benefits to a company. Has the gender bullshit gone too far? Now, Stuart brought up a comment about how there's women in the army getting special training because they're obese, but the men aren't getting special training. Little side note here for you, Stuart. Fat men are more valued in society than overweight women. Now, Julia, incredible speaker, very hard act to follow, incredibly proud to be on your team. Julia made a comment that it was because of women evening up the workplace that we have flexible arrangements. Do you know I'm in the process of with my company about battling for men to have the right to take 12 months off when they have a child? We don't have that policy. But yet here is me, a single mother of two, pushing for other men to enjoy that and be able to stay home with their child. That conversation only started because of gender. I am pushing for greater diversity, greater workplace flexibility, but it only could come from my personal experience in the workplace as a woman. Will I ever be tired of pushing for better, is my question to you. Now, when I was first asked to speak here, I was asked to give a quote about my thoughts on the topic today. And my quote was, "I can't believe we're still having this conversation. It's almost 2020. I wasn't trying to be glib. I wasn't trying to be antagonistic. It's genuine confusion. We all stand in rooms like this and we accept that not only is gender diversity important, that furthering diversity really matters. But yet we still have to have these conversations in the room to push this point." The problem with the diversity debate is that it continues to be caught up in gender. So if it continues to be caught up in gender, why not use that power, use that force and use that momentum and say, right, here's where we're starting, but let's look at everybody else. Let's look at other races, religious minorities, neurological differences. Let's involve everybody and sexual identities. Now, as a writer, it's really unusual to come to one of these things and not have a written speech. And there's a reason for that. I tried several times to write something down, but I kept getting caught up in my own anger and my own resentment that I still had to keep having this conversation. Then I was at my sister's graduation on Wednesday, less than 48 hours ago. There was more diversity in that 21 people graduating than there is in this room. I was honestly shocked. How has that company embraced the concept of diversity? I actually don't think it was a box-ticking exercise. It was they genuinely embraced the idea of the right person for the right job. Now, the topic of gender, has it gone far enough? No. It's a great place to start, and it's only going to open us up to greater and bigger ideas along the way. But I've got a couple of things that I don't think we're considering when it comes to gender diversity and further diversity. When we talk about it, as we said before, we talked about opening it up to other races, opening it up to other people, like encouraging inclusion. The other thing we forget about is socioeconomic differences. How many times have you called up your Macquarie stockbroker and it's Steve from Hoppers Crossing or Cranbourne? It's not. Those people generally, very rarely, run in the exclusive enough private boys' schools to end up in that environment. So we need to take gender, we need to expand it onto much, much bigger topics. Sorry, guys. Part of that is dismantling power structures. At the risk of not walking out of here with any friends, I'm going to tell you a story. I have a contact. One day we were talking, and this person made an off-the-cuff comment about the Perth mafia. This person works in mining. And they basically said, if you don't think like them or act like them, you're on the outs. I can't tell you this person's gender, I can't tell you this person's company, and I can't tell you what country they work in. Because if they were found out as calling it the Perth Mafia, they'd probably never work in this industry again. Now, not everybody's like that, but that is an example of an entrenched power structure that continues to reinforce groupthink. And that's really what we're up against, breaking down that entrenched power to make sure that we can be more inclusive and a more gender diverse environment. I'd like to thank you all very much for your time.
She promised much, and boy did she deliver. Thank you very much, Shay. Now, in customary form, I don't know how you, if you're aware of how these things normally work, but I like to throw it out to the floor in terms of who wins these things. Now, in Perth, there was an astonishing show from one of the speakers for the proposition who, in full sight of everyone, tried to bribe me with a bag full of Trump dollars to sway things their way, and that didn't work. So I've shown that I am above such illicit measures. He, of all people, should have known that I drafted the policy and the forms to declare those sort of things. So I am going to throw it out to the floor. So that requires noise from you, and Julia's already primed her fan base. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to call it first for the proposition, and I want to hear some noise, and then I'm going to call it for the opposition, and I want to hear some more noise, and then after that I'm going to, through scientific means, decide who takes the night. I'm not going to tell you what the results have been from Perth and Sydney, but it'll be interesting to see where things land. So without further ado, let's hear it for the proposition. It's huge. It's huge.
Pretty good.
It's enormous. Sydney, I was like, oh yeah, they've got it.
It went the other way.
Absolute power. I love it. I could get a taste for this if it wasn't for those damn men. Right, if I can throw it over now to the opposition. Oh my goodness. Who can argue with that? Least of all me. I'm giving it to the opposition. If nothing else, I'm absolutely terrified of them and their support crowd. That was an absolutely excellent debate. The opposition has rounded out the trifecta with the opposition winning in all three debates, which is a very unexpected result. I would just like to thank all of the speakers for what was a truly outstanding, passionate debate, entertaining. I'm sure you all loved it as much as I do, and I'm sure you can all appreciate the hard work that it takes to put something like this together. I'm extremely indebted to the speakers for their enthusiasm and hard work. I have the easy part. I choose a topic, throw it out to them and let them run with it, and they have really delivered, and I'm so grateful to you for that, so thank you very much.
Oh my God, you're amazing.
Peter, any closing remarks from you? I know that we're going to do the social prize later this evening. Anything further to add?
I'd just like to did the pants work? Just checking. I just wanted to say a thanks to Kelly and to Rebecca from the Gold Industry Group for putting this on. It's an enormous amount of effort that goes into this, both from an organisation and from a panellist standpoint. So let's keep the conversation going. Don't forget to use the hashtag Women in Gold 19. Please enjoy the hospitality now, and we'll be back at about 8:30 to draw the social media prize. I think before we go, I'd like to do a selfie with the team up here with you guys in the background. Would that be okay?
Just to continue a theme as well, I understand that there are multi-flavours of ice cream available. That was done without any knowledge of these speeches, but I think it's just absolutely fantastic.
But we lost. It's going back in the freezer.